Bon dia a tots, gràcies per venir. Us presento el Rodrigo Lorenzo, que alguns del departament ja l'haureu vist durant els últims mesos. Ell va fer la carrera de Biologia a la Universitat de Buenos Aires i després el doctorat en el Centre d'Investigació Austral, això m'ha pagat, d'Argentina, treballant ja en fisiologia de crustacis i relacionats amb els efectes del medi en la fisiologia d'aquests individus i en el transport. Un cop va llegir la tesi, va anar a fer un postdoctorat a la Universitat de Plymouth, també treballant en transport i fisiologia de crustacis, però ja més lligat a les concentracions d'oxigen i CO2. I ja fa un any, està per aquí per la casa, hem començat una línia de benestar animal en la que estem treballant per intentar determinar la consciència dels crustacis i si són necessaris aplicar protocols per la seva producció, el seu transport i la matança. I us deixo amb ell, la presentació la farà en anglès i després les preguntes les podeu fer en català, en castellà, amb el que vulgueu. Moltes gràcies.
Thank you, Guiomar, for the presentation. So, my name is Rodrigo, as Guiomar said. I'm working now on a European partnership project. I'm soon to be a Marie Curie Fellow in 2025 here in the ICM, CSIC. So today's talk is of crustacean welfare as for 2024. So where we're at, where we're heading, and how we are planning to get there. So to start with, I would like any of those who like to be boiled alive to raise your hands. So, yes, I expected no one. And of course, this is a bit too drastic, but as a kickoff of the talk, it was made by the People for Ethical Treatment of Animals. Yet, and this was 2013. Not much has changed with this animal legislation and worldwide, of course, and how we deal with them, and a lot of it is being studied, and a lot of it is being resisted by some sectors, and of course, policymakers cannot make up their minds. So the idea is to go through this talk a bit first of all, introducing what is animal welfare. I know some of you work with microbes and other stuff, maybe in the ocean. Talk about the current regulations, why are they like that, some more information about how to attack these topics, and what is our part that we will be taking here in ICM, as well as the partnership we're having with the University of Wageningen and the Swedish Gothenburg University, and in Norway as well. This is the part of the European partnership we are doing with other collaborators from Europe. And some conclusions and take-home message. So, we'll start simple. How do we define welfare? And here is the emphasis on we as people who research welfare and are in topic, which may not be generalized to the whole population. So this is Maya Dawkins' most famous definition, that we can see animal welfare as a conjunction of health and what animals want. But what do we mean when we say health? Of course, health is freedom from discomfort and from injury and disease. So anything either damaging or making the animal any sort of discomfort would be involved in their health. And what do animals want? Well, this is the illusion of choice. Of course, animals and breed animals, domestic animals, are confined and they have their limitations to what maybe humans that farm them can offer. They are not wild roaming, so their choices can be limited to either some space, some food. So having or giving the animals the choice of having a better food, a better enrichment of the place they are living is always going towards welfare. And this, of course, excludes something which I will talk about, and is one of the most resisted concepts, which is consciousness. Actually, like in animal welfare, we're not like asking, is this animal more conscious than other one? Are they aware? This is what we are trying to push forward, but not saying like, oh, this is smart or this is aware of what is happening. That's excluded for us, which is people who work in welfare. Not everyone, not policymakers, not the industry. And by industry, I mean both the fishery and the aquaculture industry, which I will talk later. So, as the latest news, as we're in Europe, the European Council and the Committee on Fisheries have issued this report. I'm sure you can like all read and understand what it's saying, but I will like just jump and make it easier for you. Basically, the revision on these years was on the protection of animals during transport and other related operations. And the conclusion was aquatic animals, fish, crustaceans, cephalopods, are to be protected during transport. Well, that's great. We got something. And what else? That's it. So the whole committee united to say, yeah, they should be protected during transport. Great. Well, this was a bit like short, at least in animal welfare and what many groups advocate for crustaceans at least. There are other countries that have in position legislation that ban crustaceans from being boiled alive. Well, I started asking if anybody of you wanted to be boiled alive or dismembered. In Austria, France, Switzerland, Norway, and the UK, unfortunately Spain is not included in this list, animals are banned to be boiled alive, which means it's already a bit of, they don't say how or like what should be done before they're boiled alive, but it's like boiled alive, no. So that's, and in many countries, live trade is acceptable. Talking about Spain again, we can go to the Mercat de Boqueria or anything, we can find live lobsters, live crustaceans, and that's worldwide. They are fished in North America. And a bit of this, we are also guilty because now we're experimenting on Omarus americanus, which comes live from Canada and is held here in Maresmar, and is sold live because many retailers have them live in aquarium, stocking there until like a consumer says that one and picks it to eat. And then what happens between the pick of the animal and the animal that is brought to the table? We hope the best, but maybe it's not always like that. So, was always like this? No, there's a starting point. So where do we start? So the European Food Safety Authority in 2005 had a symposium where they got together and established that the largest of decapod crustaceans are complex in behavior and appear to have some degree of awareness. We'll get back to that. And also, and this is a really important statement, they have a pain system and considerable learning ability. And they conclude at the end of the report that all decapods should receive protection. Of course, almost 10 years after, we are just worried about the transport, nothing else. The transport is the main thing to be like protected. And now I'm going to focus about the pain system and how this we can like fall into a false cognate, especially for other like animals in general. So some of you may not know this picture, but what I'll try to symbolize is someone that falls down and hurts or like has a bump, and you can say, oh, I hit something and I'm hurting and my knee or whatever is aching. So we know pain as a described human experience. I did this happened, this hurts here. There are even like pain scales. This is really intolerable pain. This is just like something like easy to continue a day. But with crustaceans, it is hard. Well, it's not with most animals, not with crustaceans, because not only they cannot speak, of course, any animals can speak, but as well, like there's a barrier where, like, how can you say if this animal is aching or not? Many vertebrates, monkeys, dogs, you can say, like, when they have an aversive reaction, can easily notice because of their behavior. So for most of these species, fish included, we talk about nociception. Nociception is a neural process encoding a noxious stimuli where pain sensation is not necessarily implied. So something that is noxious is something I don't want, which I don't know if it's having an emotion of being pain, of being hurt, but it's something I would like to avoid. And for example, from Pleasant Experience, I promise this is the only video, there were like an experiment done with, of Pori and folks in 2015, which tried to show these nociceptions in crayfish. So what it is that the wielding hot thing for metals, they touch the crayfish with the thing on and with the thing off. So in this case, you can see just the touch, of, like not hooked to electricity, and the animal is not responding, that's fine. Touching me, it's all right. Doesn't even, when the thing is hot, it's like there's a really noxious reaction to it, and the aversion tries to escape, it tries to get off of it, and even like in animals which seem responsiveless, they are like in a catatonic space, or like they cannot respond to anything that you do. When they are approached to the really hot tip, I don't know if you can see it in the video, they of course start responding and trying to escape it. So this experiment, of course, raised a lot of questions. Is this only thermoreceptors, like being triggering? Why is this considered pain? And they did the same, but with the opposite. So like something really hot, something really cold. And they put as a control, of course, thongs with nothing, and then with dry ice, which as we know, is really cold. And if any of you touch dry ice, do not recommend, you could feel like at first a burning sensation of the coldness because it's so cold. But in these animals, they don't feel it. They even can like be hooked at them. This is really cold, that's fine. Like, I'm not aversive, like, yeah, take me to the cold. Which also gives the idea, or like the debate on like the pain system. So how can we characterize a pain system which maybe in vertebrates or in humans, we both avoid the extreme heat as extreme hot? On crustaceans, is there a pain system? Well, they avoid the heat, but they don't seem to care about the cold. So we go back to this criteria for the idea of pain. And it established that for animals to experience pain, there are some couple of things to be needed in place. First of all, they need the presence of nociceptors. This could be neurons or modified cells that are the ones obtaining the signal from abroad, which is something you wanted to avoid. Then, of course, you need a central processing, saying like, this is bad, I need to avoid, I need to escape, right? And the trigger warning should be sent from a centralized processing, let's say tissue or organ. And on top of that, you need to prove the efficacy of analgesia. So we know this route works. So it's like hot, oh my God, it's hot, run. And with analgesia, say like hot, oh, yeah, I don't feel it. So like this route should be able to be blocked. And of course, like this also, because it takes the consequence, it adds the behavioral habits. Going back to my main topic, where do we stand with crustaceans? So up till now, this is something published in 2022. There was a criteria of 8 things to base the pain experience that included, as I said, the nociception, the sensory integration, integrated nociception, where is it, what is coming from, what is making me hurt, analgesia, as I talked, the modulational trade-off, well, it will be a bit hot, but maybe I will receive food, the flexible self-protection, where is it coming from and where should I shield myself, associative learning, if I go there, then I will be punished, so maybe stay here, and analgesic preference. Of course, as we will see, all of these criteria could be for most species. Like we have here, the pinnacle of evolution, the human being. Having a central nervous system with a brain, a spinal cord, peripheral nervous system, everything could be rapidly associated, everything is like known of, but it's not true for all animals. So we have like less developed to more developed, let's say, nervous systems, and where we stand. So for crustaceans, we can say they have like a dispersed nervous system in which we have different ganglia connected through like, I won't say a spinal cord, but a ganglio tissue, a nervous system that connects from the eyes all the way to the tail. And we have separated in different segments. The anterior one has like what is called brain. We'll see that is a false cognate as well. Subesophageal ganglia, the thoracic ganglia, and the abdominal ganglia. So going back to the criteria of sentience and based, this in 2022 was challenged with bibliography and with what we know and what we do not know in crustaceans, and mostly focusing on decapod crustaceans, because as a group, they're like really diverse enough. So what they concluded in this study is that there's, they used a scale from very high to very low information or like confirmation of a certain criteria being determined. So in this case, nociception, there was a high criteria that they have it. Sensor integration, very high notion that they have sensor integration. Some of them were low to very low, and that's when like things start to get a bit tricky. First of all, like for the sensor integration, where it happens, it's thought that it's in the ellipsoid bodies, in the pink regions shown to my right. Yeah, but as you see, like this is an order of decapods that they have really different pink bodies. There will be these ellipsoid bodies. So it's not fair to try to put all of them in the same bag and say. What is known that many studies that were done in Brachyuran and in two crabs, which is like highly developed ellipsoid body, they showed a lot of associative learning and a lot of integration, but that may be not true for crayfish or for langoustines or other species. So we are already like struggling there. And that what it does is like weakens the claim for welfare and the protection that we as welfare fighters fight for. But another new, let's say, definition of one health and one welfare states that poor states of animal welfare, of human welfare, so us as we live, coincide with poor states of animal welfare. So the better the animals are kept, the better humans live, or at least that is what the study showed. And this made something really important now. So as we know, since the 90s, aquaculture has increased fivefold, so it went from 20 million tons to 120. And most important, for at least us, is that crustaceans from the 2000 were less than 1 million tons being done in aquaculture, they went to 10 million tons. And yeah, still, how many fish and algae are produced? Well, the thing is, these animals are produced mainly for their meat and as a protein source. And though this graph is a bit biased, it shows the animal lives lost per kilogram of product, including indirect deaths, which is like processing deaths, or like the whole from the fishing or the raising from the aquaculture to the meat that you are presented by. And it's stated that 92.32 lives of shrimp represent 1 kilogram of meat that we eat. So in that case, there's a lot of shrimp. Of course, We think this was made or based on crangon, which is like really small shrimp species, and most of the weight is going in the carapace, so that could explain why like so little meat you need for getting to 1 kilo of meat. But still, the two main categories, shrimps and crabs, are the ones that cost-life benefit for 1 kilo of meat are in this, our wording data analysis. So how can we make policymakers care? So what most papers imply and what the scientific literature is talking about is the precautionary principle, which is this was, of course, established at first in 1992 by the United Nations. This will be a modified precautionary principle, where they stated that where there are threats of serious or irreversible damage, lack of full scientific certainty shall not be used as a reason for postponing cost-effective measures to prevent environmental degradation. And as we know, and as we believe in one health, one welfare, animals are part of the environment as well. So not having the information to prove that these animals are suffering with all these practices and with the abuse being made during the production doesn't mean that we shouldn't protect them. And as an example, it's like the burden of proof, of having to prove something for people to take notice and maybe make different law modifications, may becomes too late, as example of the frogs being boiled. While if we use the precautionary principle of like, we don't know if they will suffer, so at least try to make it as easier for them as possible. But so in order to do that, how can we help? We know that policymakers and the industry, of course, will search for the burden of proof. And that's where we step in. So we identify these problems and we say like, okay, what is our addition? So as I said, nociception has a high confidence that happens in crustaceans. There are like ion channel families involved. The sensor integration in the hemiplepoid bodies integrate information from different sources. Also the flexible self-protection that I didn't talk about, but the two crabs, you can target the protective behavior where you may burn them with acid and then they rub the part that they were burned specifically. And the associative learning, of course, it goes from low to high because the polarized studies. Some species have a lot of associated learning and could be even like associate something positively for a reward, where others just don't associate even negative stimuli. They're just like randomly moving around. So this also reserves more attention. But maybe our focus will start in the integration of nociception as a whole, the analgesia work, that is also, there's low evidence that this happens, and the motivational trade-off. So to have a bit more of a complex idea on what these animals experience, want, will be able to like expect. So what would be our contribution? So our aspiring objective, like big, enormous Marie Curie objective, is to integrate the neurological pathways in nociception in different scenarios. The thing is, this has a lot of limitations, and I will be starting to look at them and how we plan to overcome them. So the first objective, to be honest with you, is where is integration taking place? As we know, there are plenty of ganglia, one called brain, but we don't know if it's actually acting like a brain. So we need to, in vertebrates, of course, called central nervous system, most things integrating information are in brains. So for fish and reptiles, so it's easy clearly, if you go and focus in the brain to find where the information is being integrated, you will find it there. But for crustaceans, we are starting to check in the brain. So our first objective was to adapt electrophysiological recordings to crustacean species to adapt an EEG. EEG is an electroencephalogram. By the name, it means like it's done in the brain, which would be a brain or not, we don't know. So the first objective is to know if this is actually acting as a brain or maybe the supraesophageal ganglia is acting as a brain. It seems, at least in my perception, and this is like 50-50, the brain will act by sensing some of the stimuli, maybe light and also smell, and the subesophageal ganglia could be the one determining the more tactile and orientation-like stimuli. But of course, we need the electrophysiological recording showing that. So as I said, it's easier said than done. Some of the images will be a bit sensible here. So we started implementing needle electrodes to see, first, we need to know what stimuli is best to monitor the neural activity in crustaceans. So it could be light, it could be odor, it could be tactile. What do the brains respond to the most? And second, once we observe the response, how can we be sure that response is being integrated by the central nervous or like an integrating source? And by that, we mean, extinction by anesthesia. So now we know that they respond to light. When there's a light, the excitatory neurons firing in the brain. So how can we make it loose? And that takes us to the next criterion to prove analgesia. So how can we make these animals dipsy or like lose conscience? So the objective B in this project is to identify nociceptive stimuli with and without nociception. What that means is we're going to focus first on the molecular and physiological responses. We already know some targeted genes that can answer to nociception, as electricity and another, and then see if while applying anti-nociception, as the contrary of nociception, is when you add some compound, substance, or whatever, to mitigate the nociception experience. And I know some of you are getting tired, not the criteria again, but what about the whole behavioral and the cognitive behavior time? Because this is another tool that is really important when talking about awareness and sentience in crustaceans. It's not only about saying what happens inside the animal, but what the animal shows outside. So yeah, we're not done yet. Our objective C is to analyze if cognitive behavior can be displayed by lobsters. And how do we plan to do this? In the near future, so we are not doing this year, we're focusing more on the neurological part. We plan to have behavioral experiments in the aquarium. Some of you are familiar with these dispositions down in the SAE, or let's say right next to us. We plan to have recordings, which we already did for other experiments, showing more, like basing more on the recovery from noxious stimuli, but to give the animals the ability to learn to avoid noxious stimuli, and here in lobsters, because much of this is done in two crabs, not in omarus. And of course, this would be like maybe a bit far-fetched. Can they learn to obtain rewards? So this is trying to give the animal the choice of doing something, and when they do that, they receive food or something to be rewarded, which of course is seen in some species. I know for cephalopods or squids, I think they can have delayed gratification. So you are presented with something, but if you wait a bit longer, you're presented with something better, and play around that. But here is a lot of going to deep waters because we are not sure anything of this is happening. So, not to worry you anymore, to sum up, there will be a further objective, that is, can nociception and learning be seen in real time? So once we're positive that the electrodes are measuring whatever they need to be measured in the central nervous system, in the dispersed nervous system, and being integrating this information, and we can see that there are anti-nociceptive techniques to avoid that response of integrating the information, and of course we registered the learning behavior. With all of that sum up and maybe integrate it in real time, so that will mean having hopefully a non-invasive EEG while the animal learns and trying to check what pathways are turned on and off, maybe when there's anesthesia, we will have an integrate sentience sentence. So there won't be, ideally, more doubts on whether these animals are sentient or not, at least for what the criteria that policymakers are asking for. Maybe tomorrow they ask for more or less, or we can like all agree that animal welfare just should talk about the health and what animals want, and that will be enough. No nociception, no awareness, no sentience being manipulated. So, as a take-home message, overall, of course, this just started. We have preliminary data that we're not sure about. Of course, this further analysis, and we're working this every day to get to know, at least our first objective was to know if the brain is getting this information being integrated. It seems yes, but we are not able still to eliminate that integration, maybe because the anesthesia is not working, or maybe because maybe it's an impulse that is always there. So we cannot be certain about that. We will continue to develop with the coming years, of course, like integrating not only the nociception and the neural responses, we'll have to come with behavior and to see how the animals respond to all of this. And we hope we can collaborate with people of ICM, some of you that came to this talk, to do as much as possible. And here, maybe if you have experience in working with animal behavior, molecular analysis, or anything, it's always nice to have a collaboration, and a collaboration at home is twice as beneficial for all of us. So, no, this maybe fall a bit short, but thank you for your time. And we would like maybe, of course, to have another talk a couple of years later to see how much we have advanced and the new regulations that have come into place. And open to questions if there are any. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rodrigo, for the talk. So if anyone have any question, as I said before, he can do it in English or Spanish or Catalan or whatever you want.
Thank you, very, very interesting. Just a curiosity because I have no idea. There's any difference between the sex of the lobsters when you do these experiments? Is this female or male?
Well, we are mostly basing our findings in males, but the reason behind that is males don't have as much and as strong physiological shifts during the whole molting process and reproduction. And so for having a more stable model through time, we're only working on males. But yeah, it's really interesting, and I think all the EEG and techniques should be established for both males and females. And maybe, I'm guessing, different sexes will respond to different stimuli a bit different. One being more protective, maybe, or the other one being more risky. When we get to mainly the behavioral part, I think that's something to be considered. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I have a curiosity because I worked with fish several years ago, and you had to have like a certification to be able to work with this kind of animals in a lab. Is the same thing for invertebrates?
At the moment, no. We are lucky that we can experiment as much as we want and maybe put electrodes, take them, place them in different parts. And of course, we are using the 3R rule to try to use as many as possible, to try to inflict not as much pain as possible. And most of our more invasive techniques yet are not terminal for the animal. And we have some animals we tried yesterday and today they are eating, they're like fine. So the idea is to be conscient and, to be consistent with the idea of welfare, just to say, aha, we don't have to have any permits, let's kill them. Like try to work as good as possible, because when you're trying to publish this, most referees would say like, well, but have you been doing this in a welfare conscientious way? So we're just like brutally treating animals. And even like in housing, we try to have enrichment environments and do houses for the animals, even if that's not maybe yet a behavioral experiment, but as we see how they are in every day, as we keep them, we're already like having a notion how to maybe have a best practice process or protocol in this species. And the thing that we are lucky and not at the same time is like why we don't have to explain much of the certification for these animals to use anesthetics. We do need medical veterinary, maybe someone, if we want to use injectable anesthesia as ketamine or any other drugs that can be used in humans and abused by humans. But other that are safety from Food Administration, the IFRA, or the, I don't know, well, any drugs that can be used even like in cooking, we can use as much as we want for this animal, that there's no problem. Thank you.
Thank you for the talk, and I wish you the best success in your research. This is indeed a very fascinating area, no? And I think that it touches a lot of things, no? Even most philosophical ones, no?
Yeah.
The point that you made about the precautionary principle, I think is very good, is excellent, and is one thing that the people working like you or Guiomar in this area is something that should put forward or should push as much as possible in any regulatory body or legislation or whatever, no? Because I think that in our society we need that, no? Not because they don't have like brain like us, it doesn't mean that they cannot feel anything. But once I've said that, you have used in your talk the concepts of awareness, of conscience, and sentience, and these are these are difficult terms
difficult to
deal
define.
with.
They are like difficult. Well, they are used not in a correct way, and I didn't want to maybe burden the talk with all of these different notions for the self-being, and at least myself is convinced that all of those are approaches, are anthropogenic approaches. So it's like anthropogenic approaches, so it's men trying to impose what men's proper values or train of thoughts are, and that really steps on the theory of mind, which at this point we know is senseless to try to develop a theory of mind for an animal, which maybe has no, his thrive for surviving or his everyday life is not based on having to take these complex sort of decisions or being like aware of what surrounds. But yet, that doesn't mean that they are not aware or they don't experience those things.
That's something that I think that the researchers, again, no, in the same way that researchers like you guys need to push forward the precautionary principle, on the same time you have to be very careful on the use of terminology, no,
Yeah.
about these things. No? There is one philosopher, Daniel Dennett, who, by the way, wrote this book, the Darwin Dangerous Idea, which is the best book on the mechanics of natural selection that I'm aware of, that is famous for another book, 20 years old or more, Consciousness Explained, and now, last year, published another one from bacteria to Bach, Sebastian Bach, and Bach, and deals with these issues. No? And he says that consciousness is not a centralized aspect of the brain of humans or whatever, no? But is a collection of processes, like including memory, which is important to find out whether these guys, crustaceans, have or not, self-awareness, and noniception, and these kind of things that collectively give the illusion of a unified experience. So this is very complex, and it has to be dissected and cut in order to not to mix these things, and to be very careful when you say these animals are aware of themselves. No, because even in the last book of Dennett, he talks about whales, for example. Whales are pretty smart. I mean, not as smart as we are, but pretty smart as in the context of animals. And he still thinks that his level of consciousness of the whales is going to be like really like much lower than ours. And when dealing with crustaceans, because of the nervous system, some of these processes, there's no doubt that they take place, but there is a lack of this integration that allows this unified sense of awareness of self-conscious.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Frances. It's at least last week I was in a welfare sort of congress, and all of these topics more and more scientists are trying to avoid, because talking about intelligence in animal, talking about consciousness, it already like constricts them and puts them into a box that we define. So for example, we will say like an ant is more intelligent than a dog, based on what? They have hive mind, their collectiveness can take decisions and like fast spread a message much more maybe and efficiently than dogs. Yet you cannot see a brain in an ant, you can see a ganglion. So all of this, and trying to put everything in their boxes and having this scale of this is more intelligent, that is more aware, we're trying to burn them a bit down with not like being against, because of course they are like nice definitions, but trying to get a more like perhaps animal tailored definition of like, okay, lobsters care a lot about reproduction and food and shelter. Their consciousness mind will be based on that things. Will it be based on solving complex problems, like maybe parrot keys that can like shift and pull levers and like get the food after some rewards? No, because they will never encounter it. And that's, I think, one limitation and something we need to be really cautious, because we don't want to fall into like a trap of trying to prove something that we ourselves believe, while trying to, let's see the animal, how it interacts, let's see what the animal cares for, let's see what the animal trades off, and then think, okay, so the animal really cares about that particular food, or this particular shelter, and from there, try to go deeper and investigate.
Well, just one thing to clarify why we work in consciousness is because this project is related to the health and welfare partnership of the European community. So how a partnership works. The European community wants answers. So the answer, in this case, one is about conscious of animal production. So in the project of SOA, that's how they call in the partnership, the question asked is about conscious. And then we have different tasks of different animals, rabbits, cows, chickens, wherever, and we lead the part of crustaceans. So that's why we work so mainly in conscious, because it's what they pay us for. That doesn't mean that we are interested in other things. Some other question?
No?
No? So,
Okay, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
thank you for coming.